a moment that felt like the beginning of something truly special. It was a casual get-together, filled with laughter and music. I couldn't help but notice her from across the room. Her beauty was impossible to ignore. She was the kind of woman who could captivate anyone with a simple smile. The night was in full swing, and I knew I had to find a way to get to know her better. Luckily, our mutual friend was more than happy to help. She was a fantastic wing woman, and I asked her if she could introduce us. She agreed and guided me towards her. My heart raced as we approached, and I stumbled over my words, but she was gracious and warm, making it easy for me to strike up a conversation. Our initial conversation was filled with light-hearted topics, ranging from our favorite movies to our travel experiences. She had a radiant personality, and it didn't take long for us to find ourselves immersed in deep discussions about our dreams, fears, and life's greatest adventures. I was entranced by her intelligence, and her sense of humor was a perfect match for mine. As the night went on, we exchanged contact information, and I couldn't help but send her a text as soon as I left the party. The messages quickly grew more intimate, revealing our shared desires and aspirations. We were already deeply infatuated with each other, but there was a moment of reckoning when she told me about her recent loss. Her husband had passed away just 6 months ago, and she had a 3-year-old son. I was stunned by the news, and for a moment, uncertainty clouded my mind. I had always heard that getting involved with a single mom could be complicated, but her situation was unique. She had been married and had lost her husband, leaving her to navigate life as a single mother. Her beauty and the connection we shared were too precious to let slip away, so I decided to continue our flirtatious conversations. We eventually decided to go on a date, which felt like the next logical step in our blossoming relationship. After our date, I took her home for the night, and that's when our friends with benefits arrangement began. We both craved each other's company, and the chemistry between us was undeniable. Months passed, and our bond continued to deepen. We decided to officially become a couple, despite the complexities of her situation. I felt a connection not only with her, but also with her son. It was as if I was meant to step into the role her late husband had left behind, a thought that seemed absurd, but felt strangely right at the time. As we got to know each other's families, we attended family events together, making introductions and weaving our lives together. I felt welcomed in her family, and she in mine. Our connection grew stronger with every passing day. I got to know her son, and my affection for him grew, making me feel even more connected to her. In the midst of it all, I thought that I had found a woman who possessed all the qualities of a traditional wife: caring, loving, and nurturing. Our love story was far from conventional, but it was uniquely ours, and I wouldn't have had it any other way. My life was a whirlwind of responsibilities. I was a part owner of my business, which meant long hours and significant travel, consuming nearly 30% of my time. Socializing had taken a back seat, and that's how I found myself in a relationship with her. I didn't have the luxury of dating often, so when I found a beautiful woman like her, I felt compelled to make her mine, believing that I couldn't do better. She worked as a receptionist at an accounting firm, making significantly less than me, and I didn't hesitate to shower her and her son with gifts and cover her rent when she struggled to make ends meet. It was a challenging situation at times, but I was more than willing to support her. After a year of dating, I thought she checked all the boxes of what I wanted in a partner. With no hesitation, I decided to propose to her, and it was a moment of pure joy. Prior to our marriage, I had purchased a house in my name, and as I co-own a business with my partners, it was necessary for each of us to sign a robust prenuptial agreement to safeguard our business interests. She willingly signed the prenup, and we subsequently tied the knot. After our marriage, she expressed desire for me to adopt her son, and I willingly agreed to do so after 2 years of being married. I saw no issue with this arrangement, given the strong bond I had formed with the child. Our wedding day was a dream come true, and I believed she was the woman I would spend the rest of my life with. But as soon as we said our vows and moved in together, something changed. It became evident that living together brought about a shift in her behavior. Perhaps it was easier for her to make excuses when she lived alone with her son, but now that she was under the same roof as me, the excuses no longer held up. Our once vibrant sex life began to wither, and it seemed I was having more intimacy when she wasn't living with me than when she was. The initial joy of our marriage had started to give way to doubt and uncertainty, leaving me in a state of confusion and concern about our future. She began exhibiting classic signs of what I now know is infidelity, and it became increasingly difficult to ignore. She would hide her phone, coming home late when she was supposed to be there, and not answering her phone when she was out. To make matters worse, she started leaving her son with me when she went out with her so-called friends, dumping the responsibility on me. I found her behavior highly unusual, especially so early in our marriage. It made me question whether this was the true color of the person I had married. Following our marriage, I believed that she would find contentment, now being with someone financially stable, a loving fatherly figure to her son, and a stable presence in her life. Despite my reservations, I chose to have a sincere conversation with her, in the hopes of helping her see reason. She acknowledged her shortcomings and made a promise to change, providing me with a glimmer of hope. In the following months, everything seemed to be improving, and I held on to the belief that we could overcome these challenges together. But one day, as I was supposed to drive 4 hours to see a client in another city, I received a notification that his flight had been delayed by a few hours. Seizing the opportunity to freshen up and grab some much-needed sleep before hitting the road, I rushed back home. When I arrived at my house, I opened the garage door and was greeted by the sight of my wife's car in the garage. My initial thought was that she must be sick, as she was supposed to be at work. But as I stepped into the living room, I noticed something was amiss. My beloved lazy boy chair and the table next to it were pushed out of position, and I was certain they hadn't been that way when I left home that morning. Confusion quickly turned into concern, and my heart pounded as I made my way to the bedroom. There, I saw my wife lying on the bed, seemingly pretending to be asleep. The atmosphere in the room was heavy with tension, and there was an unmistakable scent of intimacy lingering in the air. It didn't take long for me to piece everything together: the displaced furniture, her unexpected presence at home when she should have been at work, and the telltale aroma in the room. I knew in that moment that she had just been with another man in our house, and I had almost caught her in the act. My emotions were a tumultuous mix of devastation, anger, and disbelief. She continued to feign sleep as I stood there, seething with a storm of emotions. Although I felt the urge to confront her with the intensity of my emotions, I forced myself to remain calm. I approached her and gently asked if she was okay. She opened her eyes and mumbled about having a headache. As I looked under the covers, I noticed that she had nothing on, a highly unusual occurrence for her, which further intensified my suspicions. Fearing that the other man might still be in the room, I began to scan my surroundings, though I was fairly certain he had made a hasty exit when I opened the garage door. My wife, on the other hand, seemed oddly curious about my actions, repeatedly asking me who and what I was looking for. Her nervousness only served to further convince me that she was aware of my suspicions and had been caught in a compromising situation. As my wife excused herself to the bathroom, I sat on the bed, my heart heavy with the weight of the undeniable truth. For some reason, I decided to pull back the covers on the bed, and my eyes fell on an unmistakable stain, one that revealed the painful reality of what had transpired. It was an X stain on our bed, a cruel reminder of infidelity right in our matrimonial bed. The shock and devastation that coursed through me were overwhelming, and I struggled to comprehend the magnitude of what had just happened. Years of experience as a salesman had taught me patience and how to remain composed in the face of adversity. Despite the overwhelming heartbreak I felt, I knew that revealing my emotions wouldn't help the situation. At that moment, I understood that I had been played. The woman I had believed to be my loving wife had never truly cared for me. She had been using me for her own desires and pleasure. Then she emerged from the bathroom, casually combing her hair with a towel, and inquired why I was home early. Just moments before, she had been feigning illness with a headache, and now she strolled around the room, acting as though nothing had happened. Her audacity left me speechless. Considering that I had nearly caught her in an act of infidelity in our marital bed while she was supposed to be at work, I couldn't bring myself to respond to her questions. Instead, I got up and walked away, with her trailing behind me, persistently asking me what I was doing in our own home. I knew that I couldn't accuse her of anything without concrete evidence, as previous arguments with her had taught me that confrontation led nowhere unless I had undeniable proof. The enormity of the situation weighed on my shoulders as I grappled with the harsh reality that my marriage had unraveled in the most painful and unexpected way. After the unsettling encounter at home, my wife seemed aware of my anger, but remained oblivious to its cause. I climbed into my car, rejoining the road with a heavy heart and a racing mind. The 4-hour drive back was the shortest I'd ever experienced, as I was consumed by my thoughts and emotions. I decided that I needed to gain some clarity on my wife's actions, so I resolved to install a GPS tracker in her car to monitor her movements when I was at home and when I was away on business trips. As a growing sense of distrust festered, as I knew she was hiding something from me. To complicate matters further, when I arrived in the town to meet my client, I received a text message from my wife expressing her anger that I had left home in a silent fury. I saw through her attempt to use reverse psychology on me, and the realization only fueled my own frustration and suspicion. Determined to uncover the truth, I ordered a GPS tracker and had it discreetly installed in her car during the night. As I monitored her movements, I noticed a pattern. On occasion, she would drive home from work during her lunch hours, spending 2 to 3 hours at home before returning to work. This behavior raised questions, as it seemed unusual for someone with a full-time job. I also observed that while I was at home taking care of her son, she would sometimes drive to a hotel when she claimed to be going to see her friends. Each new piece of information added to the growing unease and left me feeling trapped in a web of deception and betrayal, uncertain of what the future held for our troubled marriage. In that moment, the weight of betrayal pressed down on me like an unbearable burden. I had been faithfully babysitting her son, caring for him as if he were my own, completely unaware of the painful truth that lay beneath the surface. The revelation that my wife was headed to the same hotel I had observed her frequent with her affair partner shattered the last remaining fragments of trust I had in her. My emotions were in turmoil, the sense of being deceived, the sinking feeling of abandonment, and the relentless shock that she had been carrying on an affair underneath my roof sent me spiraling into an unstable, emotional state. I couldn't believe how deep her deceit ran, how she had brought her affair partner into my home, into the life of the child I had grown attached to. On that fateful day, as she announced her plans to meet her friend at the same hotel, I felt an overwhelming need to confront her. With her son by my side, I set off to track her down. I had a rough estimate of when she would be back home, so I took her son with me to the hotel, positioned ourselves in the lobby, and waited anxiously for her and her affair partner to emerge. Though the thought crossed my mind that they might take an alternate exit through the back door of the hotel, I brushed it aside. I was consumed by a mixture of anger, hurt, and the need to confront the lies that had been festering. She had underestimated me and believed she could get away with her infidelity, even going so far as to bring her affair partner into our home. The tension in the lobby seemed to stretch on for an eternity as I paced back and forth, carrying her son and awaiting their emergence. The moment I saw her and her affair partner walking out, the shock on their faces was palpable. Her expression was a mix of fear and disbelief, as if she had seen a ghost. Without thinking, I walked up to her affair partner, whom I now knew was her married boss, and handed him her son. It was a spontaneous decision, one I hadn't even thought through entirely. I knew of his marital status because they had posted work-related pictures on social media, and I had seen his family. I told him that her son was now his responsibility. Then I turned to her, my voice filled with anger and finality, and told her never to come back home. The shock on their faces intensified as they stood there, the boss still holding her son, frozen in disbelief. With that, I left the hotel lobby and headed to my car, leaving them behind in a state of stunned silence. Leaving the hotel parking lot without her son and his baby, sit still in my car, was one of the most challenging moments of that day. A part of me contemplated returning to give them the essentials, thinking that perhaps they didn't have anything for the child. But the determination to stand my ground and maintain the decisiveness of my actions won out. There was no turning back now. I was resolute in my decision. I proceeded to a home improvement store, Home Depot, where I purchased new locks. As I was driving, my phone rang, and I saw her number on the caller ID. She was crying and begging for a chance to explain and make amends. Part of me knew I shouldn't have answered, but I wanted her to feel the impact of my anger, so I decided to take the call. In that conversation, I let loose all the pent-up frustrations and resentment I had been harboring. I insulted her, berating her for the deception, for marrying me seemingly for financial stability, and for using me to care for her son while carrying on an affair with her boss. I held nothing back, letting her know the depths of my hurt and betrayal. She pleaded with me, emphasizing the boy's well-being and the fact that his belongings were still in our house. I retorted, cold and unyielding, telling her that she could come to pick up the boy's things. She expressed that she had nowhere to go, to which I replied, "I don't care." I gathered all the items I thought the boy might need and placed them at the front door, a silent testament to the end of our relationship. She arrived and knocked on the door, only to discover that I had indeed changed the locks, and she couldn't enter. I upheld my decision, and she realized that I wasn't playing games. In the end, I decided not to send her things to her boss's house, but instead I allowed her to come and pick up her belongings. The aftermath of the tumultuous events in my marriage brought about a whirlwind of change. While I hadn't intended to involve her boss's wife, a surge of anger and betrayal had led me to reach out on Facebook and divulge everything. In just 1 week, the consequences of her actions unfolded. She lost her job and found herself without a place to live, staying with a relative. The most challenging part of this entire ordeal was the effect it had on the boy, who was entirely innocent in this situation. I had grown to love him like a son, and I couldn't help but feel heartbroken that our relationship had been abruptly severed. Life is never easy, and I knew the emotional detachment would be a struggle for both of us. In the midst of the chaos, her boss's wife decided to work on her marriage. She was a stay-at-home mum with no financial support. My wayward wife's boss severed all contact with her. The divorce proceedings further highlighted her isolation in this difficult situation, and she faced the challenges of rebuilding her life independently. Thanks to the prenuptial agreement my business partners insisted on, I was able to walk away from the marriage without any financial entanglements, leaving behind a past that was tainted by betrayal and deceit. The entire experience was transformative, changing my outlook on life and relationships. I had once imagined a future filled with marriage and children, but now I was learning to adapt to life as it came, carrying with me the lessons and scars